When I was a kid, I used to live in an old house in my hometown in Wisconsin. I lived there for a quarter of my childhood, and it was a pretty small town, so practically everyone knew everyone. My childhood home was built about 200 years ago and had some history to it. Before we moved into the house, we were informed that the guy before us had committed suicide in one of the upstairs bedrooms. The house is a 2-story craftsman-style type of house. The first floor has the kitchen, dining room, living room, the master bedroom and bathroom. The second floor has 2 other guest rooms, 2 small storage rooms and an unfinished bathroom. The stairs are located near the bathroom downstairs and the garage door. The stairs lead directly up to the first bedroom and the hallway that leads to the next room, with a small second hallway that is attached to the storage rooms. As I said earlier, the house we moved into's previous owner had committed suicide in one of the bedrooms. The said bedroom later on in the future would become me and my 2 older sisters' bedroom. The man had shot himself in the room shortly after the death of his grandmother, who we found out later on also passed away in the house. Even after we moved into the house, there were still things of his left in there: clothes, knickknacks, family heirlooms, personal documents, etc. Even the bloody mattress he shot himself on, which my ever-so-frugal mother decided that if we just wash it, the bed would be good as new, and that us girls can use it in our room. Needless to say, my sisters and I weren't too keen on sleeping in there or on that bed, but we had no choice in the matter. After living in the house for a month or 2, we had forgotten about the whole thing and just continued on living our lives as normal, until a few days after the second month ended. The room me and my sisters were in was very girly, as we were young at the time. Pastel pink walls, white artisan furniture, dolls, a Disney princess TV, and lots of girly posters and such. We had a rectangular-shaped room with 3 windows. We had a deep closet with 2 storage cabinets above it. To the right of the closet, next to the bedroom door, was a tall built-in cabinet with 5 to 6 built-in wooden shelves. The shelves were filled with knickknacks, our TV, pictures, stuffed animals, and, worst of all, 3 American Girl dolls. Our bed was queen-size, stationed on the left side of a 2-windowed wall. Now about the middle, built-in shelf holding our TV and the one above it housing the 3 American Girl dolls. This is where it gets creepy. After moving in, my brother, sisters and I started to hear things in the night. Footsteps, knocking, rustling, even voices sometimes. It freaked us out, but we tried to brush it off as nothing. That was our first mistake. After a while, these noises started to get more prominent. Doors opening and closing, fans turning on and off, things being moved, etc. It just made us more spooked, but we tried to keep it out of our minds in order to sleep at night. That's when the dolls started to move. I hate those American Girl dolls staring at me while I sleep. So before I go to bed, I turn the dolls face down or put them in a drawer or a cabinet. My sisters were equally freaked out by the dolls and let me do as I pleased. One night, after putting away the dolls in the cabinet above the closet, I turned down the volume on the TV, since I can't sleep at night without some sort of light or noise in the background. I turned on a nightlight, shut the door and climbed into bed, my sisters already fast asleep. I went to sleep about 8:30 p.m, but I had woken up somewhere around 12 a.m. I heard some light footsteps out in the hallway, outside our bedroom door. I broke into a cold sweat and my hands clammed up as I tightened them around my comforter and pulled it over my head. The footsteps seemed to be getting heavier and closer than before. I peeked out of a small opening in my cocoon and looked over at my sisters, who were still sleeping soundly. The footsteps got louder until they were right outside our door. Then they suddenly stopped. I let 5 minutes go by, and with no more footsteps, I pulled the blanket off me and turned up the volume on the TV. I began very slowly to forget the whole thing and fall asleep. What I would wake up to would make sure I never slept peacefully ever again. I woke up around 8 a.m. to the smell of breakfast. I rubbed the sleep out of my eyes, looked around to see that my sisters were already up and probably downstairs. I flung myself out of bed and shrugged out of my pyjamas and started to pull on some day clothes. That's when I noticed it, or more like them. On the dresser a few feet away from my bed was the American Girl dolls, all 3 of them, upright and pristine, staring at me with cold glass eyes. I instantly remembered last night and was totally freaked out. Very soon that fear turned into anger. I stormed out of the room and down the hall. I poked my head into my brother's room, finding nothing. I heard laughing and chatter from downstairs, so I stomped my way down there, furious. I thought my brothers were messing around with me last night and trying to scare me. They might have put the dolls back out before I woke up in the morning. I was furious and wasn't in the mood for this. As I stormed into the dining room, I started to yell at them all, accusing them of setting up the dolls and stomping around last night trying to scare me. Even though they knew I hated those dolls, I wasn't prepared for the answers I received. All of my brothers vehemently denied doing anything, saying that they were asleep the whole time and that they didn't even know where the dolls were stashed away half the time, and that one of them heard the footsteps too. I was freaking out and wasn't going to stand for this or the pranks of any of them. I asked my sisters if they'd heard anything last night or if they put the dolls out. They both heard nothing and denied placing the dolls. I was so scared and outright told my mum and dad that I was sleeping with them tonight. They said okay, thinking I was just paranoid or something. The day continued as normal and I fell asleep. I thought maybe I was being over-paranoid and the next night slept in my room again. Then it started. But with knocking, more footsteps and rustling. The dolls would always find an upright position facing the bed or me in some way each morning, and no one owned up to it. After a month or more of this, I got sick of it and tossed the dolls into the basement. The night I did that was the worst than any other nights before. I went to sleep as usual, but woke up again, this time to the door opening slowly. Like any normal person, I started to flip out and shook my sisters awake. They were pissed at me to say the least, but I quickly explained what was going on and pointed at the open door. Then all three of us started to freak out and huddled together and just stared at the doorway. We could hear some light noises, but couldn't tell what they were exactly. We turned on the TV just to give us some comfort and turned up the volume to block out the noises. We didn't sleep the rest of the night and only passed out after 4 a.m. I put the dolls back into the room, and the door never opened like that again, but the footsteps resumed. I don't know if people believe me or not, but this petrified me as a kid. My dad and my mum are now divorced, and my dad still lives in that house, and sometimes I still hear things and see shadows. I don't like sleeping alone in that house or being upstairs alone anymore. If you have read my previous story, you will know that I am pretty convinced my old childhood home is haunted. This is another story to add to my paranormal background. One day during a school week when I was in grade, I had been feeling sick and was sleeping in my parents' bedroom because they had a special bed for bad backs and I have always had back and joint issues. I was sleeping at the edge of the bed, which was right by the doorway of the bedroom. It was connected to the dining room, and from there were French doors to the living room. In the other corner of the doorway, where the dining room and living room meet, there's a large, metre-tall, vase-styled floor lamp that we turn on in the early dim mornings and at night, so like any other morning, the lamp was on. As any school day, my sister was getting ready and my dad had already left for work around 7:20 a.m. My sister was constantly moving back and forth from the living room to the bathroom, doing her hair and makeup and such. I was still in a half-sleep daze and noticed my sister walking towards the bathroom, but all I could see of her was a vague silhouette. Some time passed and she hadn't gone back to the living room as I was expecting. I was having trouble staying awake, my eyes dropping closed before I would jerk myself awake again. This happened several times until something caught my eye that I will never forget. Although it was all very blurry, I remember what happened very clearly. A tall black figure wearing something that looked like a top hat and tails passed the doorway and into the living room. At first I didn't think much of it, because I was in such a daze and was totally exhausted. After several minutes I got my shit together and realised I'd seen something that didn't make sense. So I leapt up out of bed and bolted to the bathroom and saw my sister was still straightening her hair. She saw my panicked expression and asked what was wrong. I, in turn, asked her if she had walked into the living room a few minutes ago, and she replied that she had been in the bathroom for over 15 minutes with the door shut and her music on, so that was a no. I really started to lose my shit at this point, and I told her what I had just seen. The shadowy man. She didn't believe me at first, but after my insisting, she finally believed me to the extent enough to search the house for me and make sure all the locks on the doors and windows were shut. She reassured me that what I saw was probably just some sickly half-dazed trick of the eyes, and told me to just keep the doors locked while she got ready to leave for school. I was still slightly paranoid, so I turned on the lights in the house and holed myself up in the living room, making sure I'd turned the blinds open as well. After 10 more minutes, my sister had prepared to leave and said her goodbyes. I still kept the lights on for a good 2 hours after, and kept checking the locks downstairs during the rest of the day. I refused to go upstairs more than once every 2 hours or so. I honestly don't know what I saw for sure, but I know it wasn't normal, and that I wasn't imagining things. My sister has had similar things like this happening to her, which I may retell at a later date. So I don't know what else to tell you, other than ghosts in the house love to mess with people. This was a long time ago. Not the creepiest story ever, but it is certainly something that has stuck with me throughout my entire life. When this happened, I was 6, maybe 7 years old, and I am now a college student. I was sleeping in bed with my mom, and suddenly I woke up feeling somewhat frightened. Even though I was pretty young and naive, I remember feeling an overwhelming sense of violation, like somebody was watching me sleep. I was lying down with my mum behind me, and I was small enough to scooch out and sit at the head of the bed on the pillow without waking anyone. I sat there very perplexed and confused, probably still half asleep. My brother, who was sleeping next to me but on the opposite side of my mum, he's 2 years older than me, was still fast asleep with his head covered by the blanket. I poked his head with my toe and mumbled his name. Suddenly, whoever was laying right there, where I poked, looked up, but had the blanket only high enough to where they could see out but couldn't see in. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I still thought it was my brother, and I think I vaguely remember saying something about our GameCube, and then the figure quickly pulled down the covers and I could hear loud breathing like they were nervous. I prodded my mum at this point, still believing it was my brother, and I asked her, "What's wrong with Jonathan?" This part is the muddiest of what I remember. I don't remember the words she said, but I do remember the next day talking about it. Basically, she mumbled whatever she was dreaming about. So say she was dreaming about Donald Duck, she mumbled something along the lines of, "It's the duck." Not the most informative, but you get the idea. At this point I shrugged it off as snoring and scooched back under the blanket, snuggled next to my mum and fell quickly asleep. The next morning I was the first one awake, and I hopped out of bed, eager to do what it is 6-year-olds do. I walked to the other side of the room, and I will never forget the emptiness I felt in my stomach when I saw my brother sleeping on the opposite side from where I thought he was sleeping. I woke my mum up and started panicking, telling her a ghost or something was sleeping with us, which definitely didn't resonate with her. It wasn't until later in the day, when we were in the living room, that we noticed our dog was acting frightened and our glass sliding back door had been opened somehow. My mum called the police, and they came very quickly. None of the locks were broken, so at first we thought we had left the door unlocked. Yet when we checked the cameras, that house was bought by my grandmother and was burglarized when my mum was a teenager, so my family decided to install cameras, and they've been there ever since. We saw the most frightening thing ever. An old, big, fat, white man unlocking our door with a key. He came into our home and kicked our 4-pound dog when she barked, then walked into my mum's room and laid in the bed with us for 4 hours. He left approximately 5 minutes after I had woken up. The thought that someone somehow copied a key of our house, abused my dog and slept inches away from me definitely destroyed me as a little kid. It was hard for me to sleep until I was about 15. Now as a 21-year-old student, one of my biggest fears is waking to an intruder in my home. I think what terrifies me the most is that as I got older, I realised he knew exactly where to go, straight to my mum's room and lay down, so this more than likely wasn't the first time he had done something like this. Unfortunately, the cameras automatically delete the footage after 48 hours, so we had no way of knowing if this was the first time or not. He was never caught. Ever had repeating dreams? A few years ago, during a great part of my life, I experienced the most traumatic incident, and it is 100% true. After a shift working my repetitive job, I usually relax late into the night watching whatever crap is on TV. As most nights ended, I slowly drifted off to the sound of the TV. This is when it happened. I slowly opened my eyes to reveal myself standing in a hallway, but this wasn't my house. I stared around, noticing the layout and the creepy design of the house. The house was dusty, cold and dark, with only a hint of light coming from upstairs. The front door behind me was closed and sent a cold chill running through me. I think the front room was on my right. The whole house vibrated and rumbled. It felt like I was inside a mobile phone that was going off. Every part of me warned to not go upstairs, but I thought I'd rather go to the light source and find someone than stand in the dark. I was always prone to sleepwalking and would usually be found standing in the kitchen or sometimes hovering over my own bed, but never in someone else's house. I approached the stairs and noticed the decay of the house. Wallpaper peeled off the walls and hanging photos drooped to one side. I stared at the photos, noticing 2 adults and a small child. I felt like I was going to have to do a lot of explaining to this family. I mean, how does someone explain this? As each step I took up the stairs, I felt more panic, like something was about to erupt. Most likely the father would hit the intruder with a baseball bat before any explanation was given. As I got near the top, I heard static. The light I was walking towards flickered. As I peeked at the top, across from the side stair rails, I saw the left door tightly closed with multiple locks and wooden planks nailed in. It seemed it was trying to keep something in. I turned to my right and I saw a door open ajar with a TV blaring static. It was an old, small, vintage TV. The bed beside was dimly lit from the screen of the TV, and a young child around 7 or 8 was sat on the edge of the bed. I was staring at the child, who was facing away and looking blankly at the static TV. I was about to ask for help, or at least let him know I was in there. But what I saw next made me freeze on the spot. I leant on top of the handrail, about to call to the boy, when I noticed his head shape was really weird. It was shaped like a long potato, with slight dents and disfiguration. His skin was as white as paper. The boy suddenly turned to face me. I was paralyzed with fear. His eyes were a large oval shape with some kind of black liquid leaking out of them, like his eye sockets were empty. He had no nose, and his teeth were sharp fangs. He stared blankly at me. My body was petrified. I couldn't scream, I couldn't run, I couldn't do anything. Just watch. I felt the atmosphere intensify and everything started to feel like I was shaking. I literally just wanted to die at this point. Anything for this moment to end. I took a deep breath and looked up. I suddenly woke up and I have never felt more relieved. A cold chill hit my body and my hair stood up. Just a nightmare. The next 2 nights were a lot worse. When I was younger, sometimes at night I would hear noises in my home, which was in a country town in Wisconsin. I would hear or sometimes see things while I was living there. It would range from weird scratching, knocking, weird animal noises, all the way to seeing bright, glowing eyes constantly peering out from the darkness of the thicket in between the houses from the street. I honestly don't know what it was, but almost at least once a week, at night, I would see the eyes. This is where it gets weirder for me. Sometimes I would run back and forth in the kitchen since I wouldn't be allowed to go out at night past 9 p.m, and I needed to get my energy out as I have ADHD and I don't have a good outlet for it. One night as I was dancing around a little, my dad was asleep on the living room couch having passed out from coming back from work, and I had my headphones in. Whilst I was dancing around, I saw something out of the corner of my eye as I was turning. It was just almost out of my peripheral vision. I stopped and turned back to the window, which was in front of the sink and faced outwards into the street. From what I saw, the thing seemed like a doggish-like figure. It was kind of an ashen grey colour, with short hair that looked like it was almost non-existent. The ears sort of clipped at the tips, and you could kind of see its ribs. It stopped near the streetlight. I had initially thought that it was a stray dog or a dog that had escaped the local shelter, as that had tended to happen a lot because of the terrible funding the shelter had. The street lamp that was at the corner of the sidewalk washed over the dog as it edged closer to the honey yellow light, and I could see that it didn't look right. Like, not sickly looking, but sort of unnatural, in a way that people need to double take to confirm what they had just seen. The dog was indeed an ashy grey colour, and it did look to have clipped ears like I thought before, but its mouth looked weird, like it was awkwardly stuck in a crooked position. You may think the dog may have been in an accident or from an abused home, but you see most dogs who have bodily problems like that usually were put down, as many of them couldn't eat or live properly without assistance, and the shelter couldn't afford to keep them. Also, many people didn't want to adopt a dog like that, so it was already weird to see a dog with that physical issue walking around and without a collar and no owner. I had taken out my earphones at this point and opened a crack in the window. I don't know why really, maybe to call to it, or maybe I thought doing that would let me see it better. As I opened the window, it seemed to have heard the noise and turned its head to face me, which, thinking about it now, was practically impossible because it barely made any noise besides a light scuffing sound as I pushed it open. As the thing faced me, I saw something very disturbing. Its teeth. Its fucking teeth. They weren't canine-like. They were like humans but arranged to fit the dog's mouth. And its eyes were huge and red. Not an amber red colour or reddish brown colour, but a glowing reddish colour, like when you use to flash a camera at someone and their eyes flash red. It smiled at me. Well, I think it tried to smile, but the jaw was still at an awkward position, and its weirdly long tongue lolled out. In a calm panic, I quickly shut the window hard and locked it. That seemed to make it stop staring. It tilted its head towards me one last time before shutting its mouth, and dashed off into the darkness of the street ahead. I vaguely recall that it didn't have a tail, or maybe it was a really stubby one. I can't say for sure, but I don't want to remember. I know that many skinwalker stories have been told where they have no tails, and I don't want to believe what I saw is one. I really, really don't. After this encounter, I locked all the windows and locked all the doors at night, and kept at least one light on everywhere I went. I was really scared for a whole week, because I would hear scratches at the garage door. The other noises started 3 days after the scratching started, and I refused to look out the window or open any of the doors. My dad never heard anything. He's a really sound sleeper and can't wake up easily. After the 7th or 6th day, the noises stopped, but the stupid distorted animal noises, a mixture of a dog, a screeching bird, and something else remained until the last day. After the 7th day, nothing ever like that happened ever again, though sometimes at night I would see the red eyes or hear a distant animal noise, but never close enough for me to feel like it was targeting me. I stayed at that house for another year or so before I moved to Mom's for other reasons unrelated to this, but half a year ago I started to hear growling noises near my window. They weren't of any distinctive animal, they sounded inhuman but animalistic at the same time, if that makes any sense. I'm scared every once in a while, and constantly paranoid at night, making sure everything is locked or there's a light on in that room before I do anything. But I haven't heard anything or seen anything since. I've never been a religious person, The few times I've ever gone to church, it was with my grandma, and they mostly just became a bonding experience for us, because I know she likes it when I show interest in her hobbies and beliefs. But that being said, I will be damned if I didn't start trying to pray to something that night. As a teenage girl, there are a few things you really grow to appreciate after a while. Car privileges, and getting to be home alone on the weekends. This story happened while I was at home alone one Friday night in December. Lights off, popcorn, scary movie. It was literally my definition of relaxation, and my parents were both out for the night. I was sitting on the couch watching my movie with my 2 cats when I started hearing things. It was either raining or snowing that night because I heard the distinct sound of water or something hitting the roof. This was fine by me. In fact, I liked the rain. I found it relaxing, so I laid back and continued watching my movie. I started smelling something odd not too long after that, and ended up getting up and spraying some air freshener, but I still felt lightheaded and couldn't place where the smell was coming from. I even checked the oven and fireplace in case the gas pilots were on, but they were fine, so I laid down on the couch and tried to soothe my headache with water and aspirin. It was only after a few minutes that I started hearing the thumping coming from the back bedrooms. I shot up from where I had laid down, my head swimming. I paused the movie, listening. Both of my cats were laying on me, given now that they were even somewhat alert too now, awake and heads looking where I was, the hallway. The hallway started right by the basement stairs and came off right from the living room, leading down to the bedrooms and bathrooms in the rest of the house. So from where I was sitting, I could see the basement stairs, the hallway opening, and the entire front room. This includes the kitchen, the giant glass doors to the back porch, the door to the garage, and the front door. Our main room is very open. After I heard the thumping, I got extremely paranoid and grabbed my phone. I even grabbed my car keys and put my shoes on. That's what I get for watching scary movies alone, though. I was way too paranoid. I turned on pretty much every light in the house and went back to my parents' bedroom first to look around. That's when things started to get weird. In my house, we have 2 entrances into the attic, and neither of the entrance holes have an easy way to get to them because my dad was too lazy to add ladders to them. In retrospect, I'm thankful for that. The first thing I checked in my parents' room was their closet. It was a broken door that locked you in if you shut the door behind you while you were inside. So I grabbed the little key off of the door frame and opened the door so if it accidentally shut behind me I could get out. The other thing about the closet was that it had an entrance to the attic in the ceiling. When I looked up at the crawl hole, the square of plaster that acted as the cover was halfway off, and pieces of dried plaster were on the ground. Someone had moved it and broken off pieces in the process. I must have stared for a good 30 seconds before I walked out of the closet slowly and made sure that I closed it tightly and started making my way back to the kitchen. I stopped and listened. At this point I could hear the thumping noises in the attic loud and clear because my movie was paused, and I don't think I have ever walked and breathed so quietly in my life. I felt my head swimming still and I heard the thumping above the living room going towards the garage. That's where the other attic opening was, so I quickly tiptoed to the garage door and locked the handle and the deadbolt from the inside. I felt like I was going to vomit at this point. I foggily decided I wouldn't call anyone from inside the house in case the person heard me, so I was quietly praying to anything that whoever the person was couldn't get into the main part of the house until I left. I took a few seconds to gather everything and I thought I even heard the basement stairs creaking. I was so freaked out. I didn't waste any time and I grabbed my 2 cats who were scarily tame and stumbling and threw a coat on, pretty much stumbling myself outside into the cold. Once outside, I instantly felt my headache lift and I heaved in the cold air as it burned my lungs, feeling my grogginess fade. I put my 2 cats in my car and pulled it slightly down the street to my neighbour's house. I remembered to put the heat on for my little fur baby since it was 3 degrees outside that night. Luckily, it wasn't raining or snowing. I sat with my neighbour and I called my parents and the cops, who both showed up at about the same time. My mum sat with me across the street while the cops searched the house from top to bottom. It was about 15 minutes later that they told us there was no one in the house anymore. The door leading to the backyard from the garage was wide open and the attic access panel in the garage was open. They had apparently found foot and handprints all over the attic, as if someone or something had been on all fours crawling through the attic. And as if it couldn't get any worse, the entire attic had been doused in gasoline. The rain I had thought I had heard earlier that night. It was in fact not rain, but someone pouring a watering can full of gasoline on the attic floor. From what the police said, they practically almost killed themselves trying to light our house on fire. They apparently hadn't accounted for not having ventilation from the fumes and started stumbling and crawling when they couldn't walk straight anymore. I felt a little better knowing they'd got instant karma. Apparently, it even looked like they fell the 10 feet from the ceiling opening to the concrete floor in the garage, because there was a tiny bit of blood on the ground and on the back door handle. Weirdly enough, I felt even better after hearing that he'd gotten hurt. The police had me give a statement and were talking to us about how the cleanup was going to go for our house when another officer came over. He asked if I had been in my basement at all. I said no. He said that the door under the stairs was open and that there was a gasoline canteen down there as well, but there was no one there. I was pretty much stunned. He didn't say it, but there was 2 people in my house that night. One in the basement that I walked right past at least twice, and one in the attic. I don't know how the second one got out. They didn't say, or they just didn't know. But there were 2 people in my house. I had heard those basement stairs creaking as I left. They were probably so close, and thankfully I had never even taken a moment to look back. We stayed at my grandma's for a while after that, while the gasoline was being cleaned and locks were being put on our attic hatches, but nothing was really the same after that. I don't like being home alone anymore, especially not at night. And even after a long time, I don't think I will ever go in the attic again. Hey fearsome friends! Thanks again for watching, and thank you to everybody who has supported my channel so far. I've hit 100 subscribers already. Yay! Well, I know it's not much, but it's a start. I'm halfway through volume 2 and we'll be starting volume 3 very soon. So again, thank you everybody, and keep being creepy.